funny how some of the most interesting ideas come from things that just pop out of you. I made passing mention of an idea in a previous video, something totally off the cuff, but once I said it, I found it just wouldn't leave my mind. And so to that end, I've decided to use that idea for the inaugural episode of what I suspect is going to be a recurring feature here on this channel, and I'm calling it an exercise for the writer. In other words, an exercise for you. And the first exercise is this. What would happen if we took a cyberpunk setting, but explored it through the eyes of a character who might well be from a Studio Ghibli film? Is that even workable? Could there be, does there deserve to be, such a thing as cozy cyberpunk? And this is something that came out of my discussion of Ghost in the Shell a couple of videos back. And I'm not asking these questions because I have a fixed answer to them. In fact, that's exactly why I'm putting them on the table, to see what other people might do with them. I will start, though, by unpacking all the reasons I found myself thinking so much about this idea and why I think it might well be worth exploring. Because I think any formula where you say X meets Y is really powerful, especially when dealing with works of the fantastic. But it's most powerful only when you can see the power of each ingredient for what it really is. It's only powerful if you can get past cosmetics. It's only powerful if you can see the ingredients as being the embodiments of worldviews or philosophies that inform the story. So to talk about that, here's 3 things to think about whenever we say X meets Y. And I'm going to apply them specifically to the Studio Ghibli meets Cyberpunk formula as a way to unpack it. So the first thing to think about, stories are shaped by points of view. How we see something in a story colors it and shapes it. The eyes we see the story through shape it and color it most directly and intensely. So taking 2 different elements and combining them in a story, the X and the Y, it means we're also taking 2 different viewpoints. We're taking 2 different worldviews and we're bringing them into contrast or collision or even synthesis. So if we see a good world, like maybe the world of Ghibli's My Neighbor Totoro or Kiki's Delivery Service, but we see that through the eyes of someone who is not good, you know what we see? We see a bad world. We see a fallen world. But if we see a not good world, a fallen world, through the eyes of someone who has goodness to offer, like Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind, for instance, maybe we don't see a good world exactly, but we see a less terrible one. We see a world that has more capacity for improvement than a world that is seen through cynical eyes. So the point of this exercise, as I see it, is not to have the main character's Ghibli-esque naivete or innocence, which are not the same thing, by the way, crushed remorselessly by a cyberpunk world. Although if that's your jam, I can't stop you. I know it isn't my jam, though. But that leads me to insight number 2 about combining these disparate elements, which is polar opposites can lead to powerful syntheses. They don't have to just cancel each other out. And this I want to explain by way of a couple of things I think would be worth dramatizing in a story like this, in this Ghibli plus cyberpunk kind of thing. 2 key insights. And the first is that individually, people can be quite good to each other. This is a common thing in the Ghibli movies. It's one of the things we love about them. Kindness and compassion do exist in this world, and they deserve to be celebrated. And Kiki's Delivery Service, I just watched that in theaters this past week. It's a really good embodiment of this idea. But the second thing is that the mere existence of kindness and compassion between people doesn't mean that we have a world that is built on those principles. It doesn't mean that we have a society that is built around those things and celebrates them. And that's a lot harder to create. Kindness and compassion at scale are something very different from kindness and compassion between immediate peers or within a closed circle. You and I, whoever we are, we can love and respect each other without necessarily having that give rise to a society that's based on love and respect. And as we all can guess, a cyberpunk society absolutely does not have those things. That's the whole point. So that would be something I would explore in this kind of story, how the little kindnesses don't automatically build into bigger ones, and how expecting them to do so is a mistake. Small kindness leads to bigger kindness only through concerted effort. So it's important not to let the little things pass for being the big things. It's important to have good people, but good people by themselves don't necessarily make a good world. And how important it is to have a good world, because that's the way good people thrive. And that leads me to the third big insight about combining these kinds of things, which is there needs to be more going on here than a mashup of vibes. And there should be more. I think one of the dangers of talking about this kinds of X plus Y formula is exactly the same thing that makes it powerful. Right now, I'm assembling a future project. I've pitched it to friends using an X plus Y formula, and I describe it as the Lord of the Rings meets Oppenheimer. And honestly, I hate that formula. It sounds corny just coming out of my mouth. But it gets a message across. It communicates some sense of the scope and the ambitions and maybe even some of the themes that I have in mind. The danger is in taking the formula, any formula really, a little too literally for its own good. And I don't mean by this that I hope I'm going to end up with something in the same stratosphere as The Lord of the Rings or anything like that. Nobody hopes seriously for something like that anyway. It just happens if it does. The danger with this sort of formula comes from taking it not just seriously, not just letting it inform what you're doing, but taking it literally. That is, limiting yourself only to what the formula suggests and not digging deeper, not looking for those themes I was talking about earlier. The danger is in seeing the pieces as nothing but flavors instead of sources of worldviews. So here's what I mean by this with regard to the two elements I've been talking about, the Ghibli and the Cyberpunk elements. The Ghibli movies are not an art style. They're about a worldview and a sensibility. And the same thing goes for Cyberpunk. It's not just a design motif. It's a way of looking at the world. It's a politics and an ethics, not just an aesthetics. And both of those things have many discrete dimensions, as I touched on earlier. So the whole reason I want to recommend X plus Y as a story concept exercise is not because I think some X plus some Y can be cool. Well, not exclusively. This one in particular, Ghibli plus Cyberpunk, that could be really cool, because if none of you write this story, I might write it. Doing stuff like this is a way to see the deeper sides of things we reduce too easily to superficial treatment. Every big concept, every X that we could add to another Y, it's going to have multiple dimensions to it. But if you talk about them only as an X or only as a Y, only as imagery or flavor or, and here comes that dread word, vibes, it's easy to ignore those dimensions. It's easy to never get to know them. The more of those dimensions you can bring to the surface, the more truly original pieces of work you can get from them. It's the more you can be really inspired by those kinds of crossovers, instead of just taking the most obvious surface level parts of each of them and staking them together like bristle blocks. And that is fun for starters, but it's just for starters. Where else can you go with it? What can you really find inside these ideas by combining them? And what kind of homework do you need to do with each of those ideas to get that kind of stuff out into the open? So that's my exercise for the writer. Go ahead, take two things, at least one of them with an element of the fantastic, and mash them up. But don't settle for surfaces. Don't just go for what's cosmetically interesting about either one of those things. Open them up as far as you can go. See what each of them has deep inside. It affords you a great opportunity to comment on and expand on the other. So there is your homework for the week. Try it out. See what you think.